Why a strategic shift in mentality has the UConn Huskies back on track. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. So this is absolutely just saying thank you for how much you've helped this podcast grow. And it's because of fans like you that value this great content, we're proud to give it to you. So we're also proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball, the basketball capital of the world. And we're thrilled to bring you that coverage daily that you deserve. To show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games. We're also making a monthly donation to Bleeding Blue for Good, supporting NIL initiatives that make a difference. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, and leave a review wherever you listen. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's bring Dan Meehan in right away with his Gino Goat shirt. That is a dope shirt you got on there. Awesome. Dan Meehan of Exit 68 founder. Love his contributions. All right, man. Listen, I give you the pre-show stuff about how this is this non-conference season, 3 massive wins, Baylor, Texas, Gonzaga, despite all the early struggles on the island that I won't say its name. Dan is kind of had a strategic shift in a way of how he can essentially kind of not save the season, but kind of, when you think about it, we'll talk about how down the Big East is and how the non-conference slate really helped propel them back into the national conversation. Did you sense anything different? You've been to some games. We obviously watch it on TV when we're not there. Do you sense anything different about him as a coach? Because what I see is there is more like coaching and less anger, because I feel like he got grabbed after Maui and I didn't like all the pieces, but I feel like they actually said to him, like, listen, man, this team needs you and we can be really good. Do you think that's part of this and that strategic shift in coaching?
Yes and no. He's not going to, I don't think Dan Hurley is ever going to change who he is at the core as a coach.
Oh yeah,
but
for sure.
I think he made some comments I thought that were interesting this past week. He said about every 18 months, he just needs a kind of a wake-up call, just a little, okay, you're reverting back to your old ways a little bit, clean it up, get back to the root of coaching and stop getting on these reps. But it was all for good reason, I thought, out in Maui. But I think that's in the rearview now. They get 3 really good wins in a row, 1 on the road and 2 at home, 1 in a neutral setting. So I think I'm not sure. I saw that they made a big jump in the net. They jumped 9 spots from 20 up to 11. So they're right back in the mix. I don't know if the Gonzaga game, I'm pretty sure that's a neutral site game.
It is neutral site. Yep.
Yeah. So those count in top 50 against top 50 RPI opponents. So that's going to score really well later in the year. I saw some people, our guy Tuck that we had on the podcast a few days ago before previewing the Gonzaga game, he put out a top 25 rankings after the Gonzaga game and had UConn ahead of Gonzaga. He's like the only writer I saw that had the cojones to do so. So credit to him. But yeah, man, I mean, this staff, I'm sure that there were some talks behind the scenes like, hey,
for sure,
these guys probably, they know how intense you are. Maybe just dial it back a little bit and let's just get back to the grind.
Yeah, I wonder, and this is totally kind of like off the cuff. I think you wonder if Andrea had a hand in that as well. Listen, I'm married. When I act like I'm dead serious. I put out a tweet tonight. I act very similar to Dan Hurley in my own home, and it's one of the reasons why if you saw me at a game, I'd look like Little Red times 1,000. And I know people will look at that and be like, "Are you serious?" I'm dead serious. Like. I sometimes I can't control myself, and I have little kids, man. Like sometimes I have to like literally leave the room, or everyone's gonna wake up. So the idea for me is, I wonder if the the love of a good woman is just like, hey, listen, let's be an adult.
The Queen of Connecticut right there, man. Of course. She's a large part of why he didn't take the Lakers job, and he's still in Connecticut. So I'm sure it had something to do with it. Some mushroom coffee, some pie, for sure.
Yeah. What do you think? I wrote something today and also kind of talked about it on the podcast yesterday about this idea about these rotation tweaks. One thing I haven't seen, and we kind of talked about this on the live show after Gonzaga too, is, but I've had more time to think about it. Seeing Liam as a playmaker and Dan saying that he was born to take over for, or basically replace Cam Spencer. I love all that. But another aspect that I thought went unnoticed was Liam at times essentially was running point forward and was distributing at times when they wanted to have a bigger lineup in there. Do you think that another lineup tweak that we could unlock Aiden Mahaney if he plays that kind of solo ball? Not that you're not benching anybody, but in a stretch of minutes, 5, 6, 7 minutes at a time, have this bench roll where you have a bigger guard out there, whether it's Liam, whether it's Alex doing this, and you're essentially letting Aiden be the scorer and not try to be the Haas role, because I don't think Aiden is capable of that right now in this offense, but I do think he can score.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating for them that they were just kind of getting into the groove and giving Ahmad Noel more minutes before he got a little nicked up in practice. I think they really wanted to explore some of those roster adjustments and rotations with Ahmad in the mix, and not give Mahaney the back seat, but just to see, like, can we get Ahmad further along to a place where we maybe untap something that we didn't know was there. They tried it with Solo ball early last year. Solo just probably wasn't ready for the moment, just didn't have the reps. But this year, obviously, that's different. But yeah, Mahaney has the breakout game against Texas. Plays really well there. He played okay against Gonzaga. His minutes, I don't know. That was a big Haas game. So going forward, I think if if Ahmad gets healthy, they're going to explore more of those minutes and try to get back to that to see if they can find themselves in a pinch later in the conference play, going into the tournament. If they're in a pinch, if someone's in foul trouble and they need to go to a small lineup, can we rely upon a freshman to kind of give us good minutes there? They're whittling these rotations down. If you go to basketballreference.com, sort that minutes column. Jalen Stewart shooting 55%. Jaden Ross is shooting sub 40 right now. Jalen's going to start getting a few more of those minutes. Not to say Jaden's not playing well. He got some really good defensive plays at MSG against Gonzaga that kind of shifted the tide late in that game. Absolutely. Good breakaway steal. He just plays really good engaged defense, if nothing else. If the shot's not falling, that guy's 6'7" on the wing. You saw them make the switch, putting him on Jalen Stewart on Nembhard in the second half.
Yeah.
It totally flustered Gonzaga. So that's always going to be there, the defensive aspect. But yeah, with regard to the rotations, I think you're going to start seeing it tighten up just a little bit as we get into conference play.
You know what, though? I'm going to take another angle on this. You're right about the trends, because I also feel like we were playing some like tough non-conference. And so It was just kind of like best players play. And this isn't like a charity case. This is just like, so we're going to get to this in segment 2. The Big East is down this year. I did say in the last show that if there's ever a time to try to work on some rotations while you're still comfortably winning, it's going to be in the Big East, because unfortunately, I know conference and rivals is different, and people don't get in my mentions and talk about past years. This is one of the worst starts to a Big East season that there's been in a long time. And so we're going to talk about all of that and the Big East opening woes coming up after the break. It's that time of year, folks. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, this weekend, starting with college football playoff pregame show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup with SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Let's get Dan back in the fold. All right, so I started a question that I wanted to stretch to the second segment here. The Big East has had some issues in non-conference. What do you make of the Big East right now? Because, like I said, I think there's an opportunity to actually tweak with this lineup and actually be a 10 or 11 deep type team, because the Big East is down, and not because it's DePaul's playing well of all these teams, whether it's Villanova, Seton Hall. Xavier's had a tough run of it. They lost Zach Freeman, so that's who we're playing on Wednesday. That's a tough blow for that kid. I was looking forward to seeing him stack up against our bigs. What do you make of the Big East right now?
I think the conference play is really going to be the true test of where these teams are at. It started rough. The first 2, 3, 4 games for a lot of these teams in the conference, people are like, man, this doesn't look good going to the season. A lot of, chirping about the Big 12. We should have left when we had the chance, blah, blah, blah. We can worry about that in the future. But, coming into conference play, starting tomorrow, XL Center against Xavier. Xavier, we'll start with them. They came into the season, I think, as not a dark horse, but a team that a lot of people were looking to make some strides this season, crack the top 25. They haven't really done that so far this year. They're middle of the pack coming in to conference play. Their offensive rating is like top 60, top 80 on defense in Ken Palm. I'm just going to run down the standings as we go into conference play. Marquette leading the way, 9-2. Georgetown, 8-2. St. John's, 8-2. DePaul, Chris Holtman's squad, 8-2. UConn, 8-3. Yeah. UConn and Xavier both 8-3. Butler 7-4. Creighton 7-4. Villanova 7-4. Providence 7-5. Seton Hall 5-6. It's kind of lopsided. It's kind of upside down, but I think you're going to see some things break out.
The numbers aren't great there, but they're even worse when you start looking at the net and you start looking at the RPI. They're brutal. This
is why we said coming into that 3-game out of conference stretch, you got to score now. And they get an awesome quad 1 win against Gonzaga. That's going to be big for them later on in the year. Texas and Baylor, I think Baylor, that'll have some weight, but the neutral site games, because even though it's home, Baylor's not going to drop much, even if they have a tough conference play, because their net rankings always be high because they play a ton of quad 1s. And then same with Texas. Texas in the SEC. The SEC has got 15 of 17 teams right now projected in the NCAA tournament. It's the best conference in basketball right now, which is wild to say from a numbers perspective. We talked about it, I think, before a lot of people did. You can look at the AP top 25 every Monday. It doesn't matter. It is about net rankings. It is about some of these metric systems. Most importantly than that, you can look at Ken Palm just as a reference point to see where your team is at, kind of ratings.
They use it though. The
stats.
The committee uses it, and you know what the committee also is, the dirty little secret. The committee, there are plenty of older committee members that still kind of do a little RPI stuff too. It doesn't exist anymore, but they still want it because they felt like that's why the littler teams, even if they have a great year, typically don't make it. And also you're seeing these larger teams, conferences kind of rig their off season because they know they're going to play a ton of quad 1 in conference. So they barely play anyone in the regular season, or they play neutral sites. So yeah, you
saw how these numbers kind of recalibrated 3-4 games coming out of the Maui though. Memphis beat a couple good teams. Dayton, there's some chatter out there today that Dayton should be a part of the Big East. They've made great strides I don't think so either, but they beat us.
It's a great in the
last week recalibrated. UConn went from top 40 in the net. Now they're almost cracking the top 10 because of some of those teams. They lost the games, but those teams are now weighted a little higher. So UConn will get credit for that later in the year. But going into conference play, we'll see how it shakes out. You probably want some of these teams to gain some ground and start winning some games. It doesn't matter if the top half of the conference is lopsided compared to the bottom. Just make sure you are beating those teams in the top half of the standings by the end of the year.
For sure. This is a crazy stat. I don't know if you looked it up yet, but I'm going to put this on the board here. What's UConn's record in Big East openers since 1979 to 80? If you didn't look at the outline, it's okay. I have the number for you, but I'm going to put that up there.
45 year.
In case someone is watching this on YouTube and they're like, oh man, that's because they've had this weird thing. UConn is 19-26 in conference openers since 1979-80.
They play well when it matters, I guess.
Yeah, it's from a million banners to Big East titles. They're coming into this game, and I think it's a big thing for them to start on the right step. Like they're 1-5 under Dan Hurley, by the way,
especially against the Xavier team that they have just dismantled the last 2 years. It is by far and away my favorite press conference an opposing coach has ever given. Sean Miller last year looked like I love the guy. He's got a great podcast in his own right. Looked like he was going to cry after he played UConn last year. I've never heard a coach with such profound, nice words to say about the opposing team. UConn blew them out by, I think, 40 plus last year at XL Center. It was one of the loudest games of the year. Cam Spencer went nuts. They have to beat this team tomorrow. This is a must-win game. You want to talk about scoring in the net? You can't lose to Xavier, who I think is going to end. I think this team ends in the bottom half of the Big East. We'll see how it shakes out. But this is a inferior opponent without one of their best players. This is a must-win game tomorrow.
So Xavier is without their leading scorer and probably their best player, Zach Freemantle. We kind of talked about that a little earlier. He had a hip injury or something that happened in the Cincinnati game. I was watching that game because you guys
team can't catch a break.
I always watch the crosstown shootout because of my boy Wes, who, by the way, I guess someone did a live Instagram of him doing a post game speech, and it wasn't a good look for him. And but I also don't think that was meant to be shown. And it wasn't. He didn't say anything crazy, but it just doesn't. I just for knowing him as a person, he's probably I can't believe that's out there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, but anyway, I think UConn can really dominate their front court without Freemantle in the mix. I think some of the players to watch on Xavier, Ryan Conwell, he's more of a shooter. Davion McKnight's their playmaker, but Xavier does have some decent glue guys. They have a solid team. Sean Miller is a great coach. He's going to have them ready to play. This UConn team is not the UConn team of last year, but I do think that if they play well enough, they could run away with this if they play well. If they play decent basketball, they still should win. I think I wrote this in my Substack today that I think Terrance Reed has an incredible opportunity to solidify himself as the starting center of this team. And unfortunately, because of Samson Johnson's concussion and absence, I wonder if that will kind of open Dan's eyes a little bit more of what Terrance is capable of as a starter. And then conversely, I think you may see, especially with the absence of Freemantle, you probably see some smaller lineups just to kind of to kind of mess around with Alex at the 5 and get guys like Ahmad Noel in the game if he's healthy.
It's a bummer that I have a feeling Sampson isn't going to be out of this game. He was pretty banged up.
I don't believe he's playing.
Yeah, we don't know if he's in the concussion protocol or whatever, but
he is in the concussion protocol. I don't know if he's cleared it. I assume they always kind of take the first game and then reevaluate.
They sat Alex for a game when he had his head injury, so I would imagine they'll do the same with Sampson. It's a bummer that they don't have him. If they don't, this is a small Xavier roster. Zach Freemantle is the tallest guy in their starting 5. He's only 6'9". You go down the line, they're starting 6'1", 6'4", 6'7", 6'4". They don't have a guy over 6'7" coming off the bench that's going to play premier minutes. That is a big opportunity for Terrance Reed to do some damage. I'd imagine they're going to have a lot of low posts, kind of not ISO ball, but they're going to give him an opportunity to kind of back his guy down. I don't think there's a guy on the Xavier roster that can body him up one-on-one down low. So, yeah, they might try some smaller stuff, but I think this might be a heavy wing game where they just get athletic and try to run out. They had a lot of breakaways last year in that Xavier game. They shot well from 3. UConn did last year, but they were running all over that team last year. I'd imagine they'll try to do the same tomorrow.
I know that UConn fans will hate me saying this because I know Cincinnati's like a hated rival, and trust me, I can't stand if Wes Miller, who literally is in my phone, I could text him right now and be like, "Hey man, I'm talking about you on my podcast." If he wasn't a friend, I would never watch Cincinnati basketball. I would never have he sent me a bunch of stuff when he got the job. I have a Cincinnati Bearcats blanket. My son's nickname is Bear. My wife's nickname is Cat. So it was kind of funny that way, right? So it's just one of those things where I watch a lot of their games. So I watched the Xavier game, and Cincinnati has a very similar roster construction to us. They have little guards and they have athletic wings. Like the kid Mitchell that was a Texas recruit that went to Cincinnati as a transfer. I think his name is Mitchell. 5-star, phenomenal athlete, like dominated them. That could be Jalen Stewart. They have athletic bigs. Arrington Page is very similar to Terrance Reed, and Terrance Reed is even thicker and bigger. So they can dominate better, and we run better offense in Cincinnati, in my opinion. So, so obviously, I think this is you can't lose this game. You just can't lose this game at home. You can't lose this game with Zach Fremantle being on the shelf. And I think this is a 10 plus point win. And if they play really well, it could be more than that. Yep. All right, listen, we kind of jumped the gun about talking about the Big East woes, but we're going to talk about it again because I want to dive deeper into this. I got some stats for you. We're going to do a quick break and tell you about FanDuel and Prize Picks, a new sponsor, and we will be back after this. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey, UConn Nation. I'm Mark Zanetto. You guys know me as your host here. I want to tell you about Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy app. I've been using Prize Picks this season, and let me tell you, it's the best way to turn your sports knowledge into real money. This past weekend, I picked Baker Mayfield for more than 2.5 touchdowns, and I took Devontae Adams for more than 75 receiving yards. Absolutely easy money. 4 touchdowns for Baker Mayfield, 198 receiving yards for Devontae. And the whole process took less than a minute to lock in. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. You just pick more or less on a player projection. That's it. This season, you can win up to 1,000 times your money on your lineups. And they've got fast, safe withdrawals, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes when your picks hit. Plus, the holiday season is huge right now on Prize Picks. They're giving away 2 free picks in December and $30 million in rewards during their Picksmas celebration. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play the first $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Run your game, Prize Picks. Check it out. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. I am going to get Dan back on the ship. There he is. Let's get my big, stupid tag board off, and let's talk about this. The state of the Big East is, honestly, I know we talked about it a little bit in the second segment, jumping around all over the place today, but I just, Big East finished 7-8 versus AP top 25 teams and struggled against other power conferences. SEC, Big 12, Big 10. I think we're 5-6 against the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken, or 5-5. Only UConn and Marquette are currently ranked. If we look at the net rankings right now, which I'm going to pull up here in a second, I don't know, man. Just talk me off the ship because I am 100, or talk me off the plank. In other words, I've been of the persuasion that not only would this help the men, it would help the women to go to the Big 12, because the Big East women's is worse. Like at least we have Marquette. At least we can, there's Villanova. Sometimes they play decent. St. John's is a lot better this year. It's just the inconsistency. Like everyone thought Creighton. I know Creighton's dealt with some injuries and stuff, but I don't know, man. Like Creighton's been up and down. They beat Kansas, then they lose to somebody that you never heard of. So it's just tell me why I shouldn't be worried or why I'm right.
I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where the University of Connecticut is not, I'm not going to say pulling along the rest of the Big East, but they're always going to be leading the pack. They're in a place now where they got 6 national championships in 30 years. They're going to be getting premier talent. And if they weren't already getting that premier talent, they are now. That takes away, this is a very regional conference, more so than most of the other Power Fives. UConn and these schools, it's a close little cluster of schools. Some of these, games they're taking buses to. you're taking recruiting talent away from these other schools in the same region as you. That's just going to like kind of stack the deck in UConn's regard. So UConn, Marquette, the traditional power schools in the Big East have kind of fallen by the wayside with some big time coaches that have gone away. Georgetown, I don't know if that school kind of ever recovers back to their glory days. UConn's got a lot of runway here. They're not going to stop kind of dominating this conference going forward. Yeah, it's something to worry about. This is why Dan Hurley, called on the powers that be of the Big East Conference before the season on Big East Media Day. You have to kind of promote this conference a little bit better, or you might be kicking yourselves later if we do, in fact, get a bid or an invite to go to a Power 5 conference such as the ACC or the Big 12. UConn has no issue performing well against those schools. They're playing against UNC now. They kicking their butts in basketball, of all places. The University of Connecticut is kicking North Carolina's butt when they play in basketball. Michael Jordan School, Roy Williams School, Dean Smith School. Now they're playing them in football. Bill Belichick's going there. So if I'm going to the game at Fenway. It's gonna be a blast, by the way. I'm hoping to see Bill Belichick there. Be the happiest football team in New England in a while. But yeah, I think it's reason to be concerned. You don't ever want to be in a place where one team is kind of dragging the rest of the conference. And I'm not saying, no disrespect to Marquette and St. John's of the world, but let's be real here.
No, you're right. I mean, like if you really think, but here's the deal. Like it's really just right now Marquette and UConn, because St. John's right now is number 32 in the net. I think Villanova is 92. Creighton's 99. I think Seton Hall's outside of the 200s. DePaul's probably in the 60, 70 range, somewhere in that range. Providence is 74. DePaul is 70. Villanova is 68. It's just not. I mean, listen, I get it. You could do Big 12. Colorado's at 75, who we lost to. UCF is 87. They're in the Big 12. Oklahoma State, TCU are 94 and 95. You know what I mean? So you could definitely go back and forth.
Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind too. Go ahead.
One thing to keep in mind: we're early. We are still very early in this NIL. No, not in the season. In the NIL era.
Yeah, I got you.
Becoming more lopsided and top heavy by the day. You just saw University of North Carolina pledge. They went from $4 million to $20 million in NIL spend for Bill Belichick next season. 5x in one off season.
Yep.
That school has the money. You want to talk about schools that don't have the money? For football, it ain't the Big East. These schools do not have the NIL bucket to start paying players. One, the football is already terrible in the Big East. Some of our schools are not even Division I. So you have to keep that stuff in mind. I mean, you just saw UConn football lose two of our best players in the portal before the bowl game. It's going to keep happening. In the coming years, it's just going to get more lopsided, in my opinion.
No, I think you're spot on. I think but I also feel like too, the transfer portal now is kind of like, especially in football, basketball is a little more a little less transactional, because at least from what we see with UConn, but like the transfer portal in football is kind of like opening of negotiations, right? Just to kind of see what's out there. Like, I knew that Darrell Robinson, I went on Locked on Auburn and did a spot with how Darrell went to Auburn. Good for him. He's going to go play in the SEC and play for a good club there down in Alabama. That's, I'm sure he got paid a lot of money. Awesome. I have no issue. I think I read somewhere that Jim Mora is essentially going to start pitching that, like, hey, come get some exposure. And while we're building this thing up here to, get our NIL dollars up, if you're not getting the type of money that you think you deserve now, have a great season here like Darrell did, average 7 yards a carry, 8 touchdowns. And then you could parlay that into a Big Ten or an SEC contract, because that's all it is. And I don't see why that would be wrong. Like, I think that's something that he's got to take advantage of. And I also think that a kid like Skylar Bell has been recruiting players to come to UConn. So like, he's just trying to figure out, like, I think if the rules are there for them to exploit them, do it. Like, it's kind of like being upset at a guy who takes advantage of like tax law. If you can do it, do it. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, if you can make more money doing something and it's legal, then do it. I think the idea here is we all just have to understand that transfer portal is going to happen. Like, I got into an argument today on Twitter about about UConn and how guys don't really transfer. Doesn't mean that some guys don't want to in the middle of the season. I guarantee you there's a few guys on our team right now who are pissed off about not playing. And it's the coaching staff's job to kind of guide them through that. And if they want to go at the end of the year, they do, or they want to test the waters, but the grass isn't always greener. And so sometimes it's really just about the grind and getting better. And I think the Big East, though, it's just, for me, it's early in this. And it's one of the reasons why when you talk about the disparity in NIL, it's one of the reasons why we have to think proactively as a university and potentially keep pushing for that Big 12 invite, keep pushing for maybe ACC, although I think ACC will die on the vine. So for me, it's Big 12. It's kind of Big 12 or bust.
Agreed. By the way, this week I learned that University of California, Berkeley is in the ACC, the Atlantic Coast.
You didn't know
Conference.
that?
I didn't know that until this past week. Conference realignment is a joke. Can we get back
to yeah, my buddy down here who does a show and it's ACC focused because he's in North Carolina said when that whole thing happened, SMU, Cal, Stanford, he was like Christian McCaffrey, ACC legend. You know what I mean? Like, so he went back to like whoever played for them. Aaron Rodgers, ACC legend. So, there's some tongue-in-cheek stuff there, but
so broken.
All I gotta say is I'm excited for the Big East opener, as I always am, but I'm not as excited about how down the teams seem this year. But maybe they'll pick it up. That part of the year is early. Hopefully these teams will get healthy and they'll get
something to look forward to. Tomorrow is a whiteout and $3 beer night at XL Center.
I love it.
So show up.
All right,
show up,
going?
folks. Be loud. I will not be there tomorrow. I can't make it, but I'll be ready for the live show whenever we go live after the game.
All right, guys. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For my boy Dan Meehan, I am Mark Zanetto saying, stay locked on, stay aggressive, because I read something that the fans in the streets of New York City this past Saturday that took over the Garden are getting people fired up pre-game, during the game, post-game. I love it that their toughness meters were at an all-time high. Let's go, boys. Let's get after it. Let's start the Big East strong. We're out.